Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I remember mindlessly scrolling through Craigslist ads one afternoon, and little did I know it would lead to one of the worst moments of my life. My eyes landed on one posting that immediately caught my attention, a job opportunity paying an almost unbelievable hourly rate for a personal assistant. I had to read it twice just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. The work itself sounded easy enough: housekeeping, running errands, yard work. And the flexible hours meant I could fit it in after school and on weekends. This was exactly what I, a cash-strapped 16-year-old, needed. I composed an enthusiastic reply expressing my interest and asking for more details. Not long after, I received a response from the poster, James, who seemed eager to bring me on board. We exchanged a few emails back and forth in which he asked about my work experience, and I shared a bit about school and my hobbies. James came across as friendly and engaging over email, telling me he was looking for help around the house since his wife had recently passed away. I felt sympathy for him and was excited by the prospect of earning some extra money. After a week or so of email exchanges, James suggested we meet in person to talk through the details of the job opportunity. He picked a coffee shop downtown that I knew well, so I felt comfortable agreeing to the meeting. Upon walking in, I quickly spotted James sitting by himself at a table. He appeared to be in his 40s, average height with graying brown hair and a kind smile. We grabbed coffees and sat chatting about everyday things like the weather and my classes at school. Nothing seemed amiss during our casual small talk. An hour passed surprisingly quickly, and by the end James had offered me the job, which I eagerly accepted. I began working for James the very next day, cleaning and tidying up his modest 2-bedroom home on the outskirts of town. He was always home when I was there, usually reading the paper or puttering around in the garden. The first week or so was completely uneventful. In fact, James hardly spoke to me most days, just letting me do my work. But over time, I noticed him starting to make conversation here and there. Innocent things at first, like asking about my weekend plans. But before long, the questions became more probing, wanting to know about my family life, my relationships, my insecurities. I hesitantly opened up to him, though deep down something felt off. But he seemed trustworthy, even fatherly in a way, so I pushed away any doubts. About a month into the job, I arrived at James' house one Tuesday afternoon to find him not home. Figuring he must have stepped out to run an errand, I got to work cleaning his bedroom. As I was dusting, I'd noticed a manila folder poking out from under a pile of clothes on his dresser. Curiosity got the best of me, so I slid it out to take a quick peek. What I saw made my stomach drop. The folder was filled with photos of me, some taken around James' house, others at school, the mall, the coffee shop from our first meeting. Disgusted, I shoved the folder away just as I heard keys in the front door. James entered, casual as could be, and asked how the cleaning was going. I confronted him right then and there, hand shaking as I showed him the folder of photos. His facade quickly faded as he realized he'd been caught. A sinister, predatory look overtook his face, and he began muttering things under his breath about how I just didn't understand. I felt welded to the spot, frozen by fear and disbelief at this man I had trusted. As he slowly approached me, the true danger of my situation sank in. I snapped out of my paralyzed state into the only thing I ran. I blew past James and out the front door as fast as my feet would carry me. I could hear him yelling after me from the porch, but I didn't dare look back. I sprinted block after block until I came upon a busy intersection swarming with people. I frantically waved down the first car I saw and begged the drivers to call the police. Within minutes, police cars came screaming down the street, having traced the call back to James' address. I could barely breathe, but managed to recount everything to the officers. The weeks of subtle manipulation, the folder of secret photos, the terrifying moment when I fled his house. As it turned out, I wasn't James' first victim. The police uncovered evidence that he harassed and stalked numerous young women through Craigslist ads. It was a pattern he had been repeating for years, luring girls in with the facade of a friendly job opportunity. I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I escaped before worse could happen. In the months following, I withdrew into myself, overwhelmed with trauma and paranoia. I jumped at every little sound, constantly feeling unsafe. Just leaving the house left me riddled with anxiety. It has taken a lot of time and therapy to move forward after what I endured, but opening up about it has helped immensely, as has realizing that none of what happened was my fault. Keynes was a disturbed, calculating predator. I'll never see the world the same way again after staring evil in the face like that. My innocence is gone, but I'm determined to not let this experience harden me completely. It has given me wisdom and resilience that I otherwise wouldn't have. And it taught me to always trust my instincts, especially when it comes to strangers who seem too good to be true. Monsters often hide in plain sight. My family and I eagerly anticipated our beach trip this summer. It had been over 2 years since our last real vacation, and with a toddler and preschooler at home, my husband Mark and I rarely got any time to ourselves. We desperately needed this getaway, just the four of us, to relax and reconnect. We scrimped and saved for months to afford a week-long rental. With money tight, I knew we couldn't splurge on an expensive resort, but I was determined to find an affordable option so we could enjoy a much-needed break. After searching vacation rental sites to no avail, I turned to Craigslist, and that's when I found it. A charming pale blue cottage right on the beach for only $500 a week. The photos showed a quaint house with white trim, a cheerful red door, and a welcoming front porch with cozy furniture. The listing described a sunny 3-bedroom home with an open kitchen, cub ceilings, and beautiful hardwood floors throughout. According to the post, the owner, a woman named Ann Smith, inherited the home from her grandmother, but now lived out of state. She was simply looking for nice families to enjoy it during the off-season. I eagerly emailed Ann and asked follow-up questions about amenities and local attractions. She responded quickly and politely to each inquiry, assuring me it was a perfect place for a family getaway. She even sent additional photos of the light-filled living areas and spacious bedrooms. Everything looked clean, well-maintained, and decorated in a beachy cottage style. After discussing it with Mark, we decided to go for it and booked the cottage for the first week of May. As our trip approached, I could barely contain my excitement. I just knew this would be the peaceful vacation we needed as a family. A chance to put work stress and household chaos aside for a few days. I imagined leisurely mornings, sipping coffee on the porch, bike rides along the shoreline, collecting shells with the kids at sunset. Mark and I have been desperate for some quality time, so I even asked my parents if they could keep the kids one night so we could have a date night. The drive down took nearly 5 hours with stops, but the time passed quickly. The kids watched movies in the back seat and even napped a bit. We played silly road trip games and sang along to songs. By the time we crossed into town, we were all ready to get out and stretch our legs. I pulled up the directions on my phone and navigated towards the rental. But as we pulled up, my excitement turned to confusion and dismay. The house was pale blue, but the yard was terribly overgrown with weeds and ragged bushes. The windows were all filthy, some with cracked panes. The front porch sagged precariously to one side. I triple-checked the address and confirmed we were in the right spot, but this decrepit place bore no resemblance to the charming cottage we'd booked. Hesitantly, we approached the front door. Mark knocked loudly but got no answer. He tried peering in the dusty windows, but it was too dim inside to make anything out. I checked the lockbox, retrieving the key Ann had left, but my hand trembled to turning it in the lock. The musty stench that wafted out as I opened the door made me gag. Inside, it was like a time capsule from the 1970s. Thick layers of dust and grime coated every surface. The floor felt sticky. Wallpaper curled and yellowed. The kitchen appliances were rusted and outdated. Loose wires hung from open junction boxes. The bathrooms had broken fixtures with mildew stains. The place clearly had not been occupied, let alone cleaned, in many years. It was utterly uninhabitable. My heart sank realizing we'd been scammed. The charming beach cottage in those photos did not exist. Ann had posted fake pictures to dupe vacationers into paying for this dump. We'd spent our entire vacation budget on this so-called rental. I felt like an idiot for trusting a Craigslist stranger. Mark and I walked numbly through the dilapidated rooms in disbelief. We'd been desperately looking forward to this trip for months. I could only imagine the relaxing evenings and family memories we'd make here. But instead, the long-awaited vacation I had been daydreaming of was ruined before it even began. In a last-ditch effort, I tried calling and emailing Anne. The number went straight to a generic voicemail box while the emails bounced back undelivered. Of course she had given me bogus contact information. Who knows if Anne Smith was even a real person? We'd almost considered staying and trying to make the best of it. But the cottage needed tens of thousands of dollars in repairs before it would be remotely inhabitable. As afternoon turned to evening, we had to face facts. There was no way we could spend one night here, let alone a whole week. Feeling defeated, we piled back into the van. The kids were getting hungry and restless with nowhere to unpack their things. I frantically searched travel sites for nearby lodging options. But it was peak tourism season and vacancy was scarce. The rare opening I did find got snatched up as I tried to book. We eventually took the last room at an overpriced, rundown motel several miles away. The dingy room wasn't at all I had in mind, but we were desperate. Exhausted, we collapsed into the stiff beds and tried sleeping, the day's excitement completely deflated. The next morning, I filed a detailed complaint about the fraudulent listing on Craigslist. I tried calling Anne a few more times, but still no luck. Furious at being scammed out of our hard-earned money, we cut the trip short and drove back home after just 2 nights away. It was such an utterly disappointing experience. Nothing like the calm, enjoyable week I'd envisioned. In hindsight, I clearly should have known an oceanfront rental for $500 was too good to be true. I learned the hard way to be more skeptical and always thoroughly research vacation rentals, even if it means losing a supposed deal. This awful trip will remind me to trust my instincts next time. While the kids are too young to probably remember this vacation gone wrong, the stress, anger, and disappointment will stick with Mark and I for years to come. But it also taught me just how much we need to prioritize family time, no matter the cost. Once we save up again, we'll certainly book something through reputable channels, even if we have to scale back the length. Because nothing is worth risking what little precious time we get with our kids. When I think back on the bizarre situation that unfolded while selling our home, it still seems unbelievable that we were targeted by such an elaborate rental scam. My wife, Jen, and I had purchased a lovely 3-bedroom house in the suburbs over 15 years ago shortly after getting married. It was our first real home together, and we were so excited to decorate each room and make our own. We planted flowers in the front yard, hung photos on the walls, and made many happy memories there as we started our family. Our 2 kids, Jack and Sarah, grew up running around the large fenced backyard and hosting sleepovers with friends in their cozy upstairs bedrooms. As the years passed, the kids eventually left for college and our nest became empty. Jen and I rattled around in the house built for a bustling family and decided it was time to downsize. I was nearing retirement age anyway, and we wanted something smaller and easier to maintain. We met with a local realtor named Diane who helped us get the house ready to list. She was positive it would sell quickly given the hot real estate market. After painting walls, staging rooms, and doing some landscaping, we officially listed the property. Within 2 weeks, we had an offer well over asking price from a young family with 2 little boys. Jen and I were thrilled and accepted immediately. The buyers wanted to close in 30 days, which worked perfectly for our timeline. We booked movers, found a new condo to purchase, and started packing everything up. About 2 weeks before the scheduled closing date, I arrived home from work one evening to find 2 unfamiliar cars parked in our driveway. A man and woman stood on the front porch, peering in the windows. When I got out of my car, they walked over and introduced themselves as Sam and Maggie. We're so excited to see the rental house. Are you the landlord? Can we look inside now? The woman asked eagerly. I was completely confused and explained they must have the wrong address. This house was for sale, not rent. The couple looked surprised and apologized. As they drove off, I noticed they had left some brochures about local schools sitting on the porch. The next morning, I mentioned the incident to Jen as we were having coffee. She was just as baffled as I was. We decided to keep an eye out for any more strange activities. Sure enough, over the next few days, more prospective renters started showing up at odd hours. A few people even knocked loudly or rang the bell multiple times looking for the landlord. Cars would slowly drive by, sometimes stopping out front for a few minutes before moving on. Our realtor Diane called to ask if we had listed the property as a rental somewhere, and we told her no. apparently several potential tenants had contacted her office asking about leasing the house long-term after seeing a Craigslist ad. I immediately searched Craigslist and found an ad with pictures of our home stating it was available for rent with immediate occupancy. The poster's name was Mike Roberts. Diane and Ad both reported the fraudulent listing, but so far Craigslist wasn't removing it. The ad would disappear for a day and then get reposted with a new email address. By the end of the week, the rental inquiries were nonstop. Since we had already sold the house, I couldn't understand why the scammer continued advertising it as available. Groups of people, including some families with young kids, were showing up hoping for a viewing. A few said they had already paid a security deposit to Mike Roberts via email. One man knocked, and when I opened the door, he became angry and accused me of falsely advertising the rental. A woman parked outside for over an hour one evening just watching the house suspiciously. I decided to take more drastic action. I printed out flyers stating our home was not for rent and that the Craigslist listing was fraudulent. I posted these prominently around the property and on the front door. I also installed video cameras aimed at the driveway and porch in case the harassment continued. Despite the warnings, people kept arriving to see the phantom rental listing. One Saturday morning, I opened the door to find a group of college students with a U-Haul truck parked out front. They said they had already paid Mike Roberts over $1,000 for the security deposit and first month's rent. The group was irate to learn they were victims of a scam. I felt bad for them but urged them to contact the police since I had no involvement. After 3 agonizing weeks of rental inquiries, move-in requests, and suspicious activity, closing day finally arrived. That morning, a few more potential renters came by hoping to see the house, but I politely informed them it was now sold. Later that evening, I did a final walkthrough before handing over the keys to the new owners. I felt exhausted yet extremely relieved this stressful ordeal was finally over. In hindsight, I wish I had been more proactive in getting the false ad removed right away. I should have called the police earlier once money was exchanging hands between victims and the scammer. All I can do now is warn others selling their home to be vigilant about monitoring online listings. Don't assume a fraudulent ad will just go away on its own. Take steps to stop the activity immediately before things escalate out of control. While our experience was a nightmare, I hope my cautionary tale can help prevent this from happening to someone else. For now, I'm just looking forward to a fresh start in our new condo free from the chaos we endured those last few weeks. When I decided to search for a new roommate on Craigslist, I was feeling desperate. The rent on my modest one-bedroom apartment in the city was getting impossible to cover on my own, but finding an affordable living situation with a decent roommate felt like searching for a unicorn. Rents were skyrocketing all over, and most people I encountered either couldn't pass a basic background check or gave me an uneasy vibe right off the bat. But I was determined to make this work somehow. After spending weeks sifting through a barrage of responses to my own carefully worded Craigslist ad, I finally came across one message that seemed somewhat promising. Sarah was in her mid-20s, around my age, and her email was articulate and friendly without raising any immediate red flags. She explained that she had just moved to the city a couple months ago after landing a new job, but was struggling to find stable housing ever since. Between steep rental prices and the cutthroat competition for vacancies, her housing search had been a constant struggle. I could certainly relate and felt a pang of empathy reading about her urgency to lock something down. After some initial back and forth, we decided to meet up the following afternoon so I could show her the apartment. When we met outside my building, I was relieved to see Sarah look normal and pleasant in person. She came across a bit shy at first, but was polite and spoke enthusiastically about the neighborhood and her new job as a receptionist at a dentist's office downtown. Nothing about her set off any alarm bells, so I brought her upstairs to tour the modest one-bedroom unit I currently occupied alone. It wasn't much to brag about decor-wise, with dated appliances and worn beige carpeting throughout, but Sarah's eyes lit up the minute we walked inside. She complimented the exposed brick wall in the living room, sunny bedroom window, and even the rickety fire escape visible through the kitchen. "This is perfect," she gushed, accepting my offer to move in on the spot. Given how desperate I was for help covering the rent, I felt like I had hit the roommate jackpot. The first few weeks of living together were smooth sailing. Sarah was very quiet and kept to herself for the most part, while I was simply relieved to have someone reliably paying the other half of rent and utilities. She tied it up after herself, paid her share promptly each month, and rarely had people over from what I could tell. As far as roommates went, I really couldn't complain. But over time, the subtle changes in Sarah's behavior started to bother me. She began disappearing for hours on end, sometimes not returning until the next morning with no explanation whatsoever. When she did come home, she was edgy and evasive whenever I tried asking where she had been. Her eyes were often bloodshot and darting around, leading me to suspect drug use. I wanted to give Sarah the benefit of the doubt, chalking it up to her adjusting to a new city. But an uneasy feeling gnawed at me that something more sinister might be at play. Still, without concrete proof, I kept silent, hoping the pattern would blow over. Of course, it only escalated. One evening after staying late at the office, I came home to find our front door unlocked, and the apartment completely ransacked, living room furniture overturned, kitchen drawers emptied across the tile floors, my belongings scattered everywhere. I felt the blood drain from my face as I took stock of the higher price items now missing, my MacBook, jewelry box, brand new DSLR camera, even my passport. As I sank to the floor amidst the mess, hot tears stinging my eyes, my suspicions immediately turned to Sarah. All those random extended disappearances, her cagey evasiveness, she had to be involved somehow, whether she had made copies of my keys to sneak back later, or was allowing questionable friends access while I was out at work, I wasn't sure. But I knew in my gut I could no longer trust my roommate as I stewed over the possibilities, feeling violated. When I confronted Sarah, she broke down sobbing and adamantly denied knowing anything about the robbery. She swore complete innocence, insisting it must have been one of her new acquaintances in the city looking for drug money. As much as I wanted to believe she wasn't capable of betraying me, I had seen too many questionable signs from her lately to take her at her word anymore. Still, I had no definitive evidence either way, so an uneasy truce persisted between us over the next few days. Returning home from work each night, I found myself practically holding my breath until I walked inside, half expecting to find another chunk of my belongings stolen. The violated feeling lingered with no resolution in sight. My resentment towards Sarah simmered, despite her fox-sweet conciliatory gestures. I frequently came home now to find her entertaining sea-looking characters I definitely hadn't approved as guests. It was time to take control of this situation before something worse happened. One evening after the shadiest visitor yet had left, I confronted Sarah with my demand that she move out immediately. To my disbelief, she refused outright, arguing that she was entitled to 30 days' notice. Fine then, 30 days' notice it would be. But before those 30 days were up, everything escalated out of my control. I arrived home late one night to find 2 police officers at my door to greet me. Sarah had apparently accused me of threatening her, playing the victim to the hilt. As the officers informed me I needed to vacate the premises immediately pending investigation, I stood there flabbergasted. Desperately, I tried convincing them that I was the actual victim in all this, presenting evidence of the robbery and explaining my reasons for asking Sarah to move out. But the officers showed little interest in hearing my side of things, with Sarah's contradicting statements. I had no choice but to shove some clothes in a bag and make urgent arrangements to crash at a friend's place, absolutely seething over this insane twist. In the cold light of day, I made multiple appeals to the police officers, backed up by every shred of evidence supporting my account of events. Photos documenting the apartment break-in, emails showing I purchased the stolen electronics, records of conversations with Sarah that seemed incriminating in retrospect. But with Sarah still living there and sticking to her story, it became painfully clear I had no path forward. As unfair as it felt, if I had any hope of getting my apartment back, I was going to have to cut my losses and make arrangements to move out permanently. Sarah clearly had the upper hand here, and I refused to live looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next fabricated accusation or subsequent robbery. Within 2 weeks, I found a slightly more expensive but safer alternative apartment across town, hurriedly moved my remaining possessions, and bid good riddance to that toxic living situation forever. In the end, Sarah's lies and betrayal had cost me not only my valuables, but also the affordable apartment I loved. Hard lessons about trust and intuition were learned. When I saw that Craigslist ad for a room rental, I should have known it was too good to be true. I was in a vulnerable place, having just gone through a devastating breakup with my girlfriend of over a year. We had been living together in a cute little apartment I could no longer afford on my own. The split had come out of nowhere and completely blindsided me. One day we were making plans for the future. The next she was gone without explanation. My entire world shattered in an instant. I was forced to pack up my things and find a new living situation immediately. But in my depressed, heartbroken state, I could barely get out of bed in the morning, let alone look for apartments. The deadline to be out of our place was fast approaching, though. Out of sheer desperation, I turned to Craigslist to search for a room to rent. Scrolling through the listings, I could feel myself entering panic mode. Even the cheapest rooms were more than I could swing after losing my girlfriend's financial contribution. Just as hopelessness set in, a new ad popped up that seemed like the answer to my prayers. A spacious room in a house nearby was renting for only $500 a month. Dirt cheap for the area. The description said it was available immediately, no credit check or deposit required. In my frenzied mindset, I didn't stop to wonder why the price was so low. I felt like the universe had thrown me a lifeline, so I grasped it without hesitation. I contacted the landlord, who seemed flexible and laid back over email. He said I could start moving my stuff over that same day. No walkthrough or paperwork required. Desperate for housing, I jumped at the opportunity. The eviction deadline was the next morning, so I scrambled to box up my belongings and borrow a friend's truck. When I arrived at the house with the first carload, things seemed normal at first glance. It was an older home in a working-class neighborhood, a bit run down but livable. My new room was spacious just like the ad described. The carpet was an outdated shag and the mattress on the floor looked worn, but I could make upgrades. I was solely focused on getting a roof over my head. After unloading the essentials, I crashed in exhaustion on my new mattress. But then I was jolted awake by an odd smell, like bitter chemicals or burning plastic. I assumed it must be coming from outside the house. But over the next couple days, I realized the stench permeated every room. My unease grew as the odor intensified by the day. Soon, even keeping my door shut couldn't block the rank fumes that irritated my nose, eyes, and throat. I decided to gently mention my concerns to the landlord, but he brushed it off like it was no big deal. The more persistently I complained, the more evasive he became. I should have taken this as a major warning sign something shady was going on, but I was oblivious, still reeling from my breakup. I kept optimistically believing there must be an innocent explanation. When the smell became so overpowering I could barely breathe, I begged the landlord to send a maintenance man. After days of nagging, he finally relented. The repair guy gave the house a cursory glance, declared he couldn't find a source, and left. But the wretched stench continued to mount. At my wit's end, I demanded the landlord send someone back for a real inspection. This time, I vigilantly followed the maintenance man from attic to basement, urging him to leave no stone unturned. As we entered my bedroom, he paused and removed the outlet plate on the wall. Immediately, the piercing chemical odor poured out full force. We both recoiled, hands over our mouths. "I know this smell," he muttered gravely. "It's a meth lab." My heart dropped and panic flooded my body. The guy bolted from the room to call the police. Within an hour, the house was swarming with police conducting a raid. Turns out, 2 of my housemates had been secretly operating a massive meth operation right under our noses in the locked basement. As the lab was dismantled, the hazmat crew condemned the entire property as an uninhabitable biohazard site. Shaken in outrage, I hastily threw my contaminated belongings into trash bags and fled the toxic home. For days after, the chemical smell lingered on my clothes and skin no matter how much I scrubbed. I crashed on a buddy's couch while trying to mentally process the horror of what I had blindly moved into. The more I reflected, the angrier I became at myself. I had ignored all the obvious red flags. The landlord's behavior, the low rent, the lack of a background check. In my post-breakup haze, I had put myself in grave danger by failing to properly vet the property and roommates. Who knows what long-term health consequences I could suffer from breathing in those brain-damaging fumes. It was a wake-up call to always be diligent about researching anywhere I live, even when stressed and frenzied. Now, when apartment hunting, I take the time to thoroughly inspect the home, meet the landlord and tenants, check property records, and search for any shady history. I won't let desperation cloud my judgment again. This traumatic misadventure was the absolute worst possible living situation at my most vulnerable time. Although I'm now safely settled, The stressful disruption to my life after the breakup did take a toll on my mental health, but I'm relieved to say my vigilance has paid off, and I'm now thriving in a stable, secure home. My Craigslist meth house nightmare will haunt me forever, but it taught me to face adversity cautiously and protect myself by staying alert. I never imagined I would be the victim of something so violating and malicious, but that's exactly what happened after I broke up with my controlling and jealous ex-boyfriend Matt. Matt seemed great when we first started dating. He was charming, affectionate, and attentive. Looking back now, I can see the subtle ways he tried to isolate me from my friends and family. At the time, I thought it was sweet how he always wanted to spend time together, just the two of us. But his concern over who I was hanging out with or texting quickly morphed into accusations anytime I wanted to do something without him. The argument started. Matt would get upset if I went out for drinks with coworkers after work or made plans to visit my mom for the weekend. He accused me of cheating anytime I talked to another guy. I started walking on eggshells, afraid that the slightest thing would set him off. His irrational jealousy was stifling. I finally worked up the courage to break up with Matt after he deleted all the male contacts from my phone in a fit of rage. I knew then the relationship was toxic and I had to get out. Matt begged me to reconsider, but my mind was made up. Little did I know the nightmare was only beginning. A few weeks after the breakup, around 4 a.m., my phone started buzzing with calls and vulgar text messages from unfamiliar numbers. Confused and frightened, I looked at some of the texts. They were from strange men, saying disgusting, explicit things they wanted to do to me. I had no idea who these creeps were or how they got my number. After digging into it, I discovered the horrifying truth. Someone had posted a revealing photo of me on Craigslist's adult section, along with my phone number. The photo showed me in lingerie, with my face clearly visible. The accompanying post said I was interested in hookups with well-endowed black men. My hands shook as I looked at the post. I felt nauseous knowing these perverts had seen a private photo of me in a compromising position. It only took me a moment to realize Matt had to be responsible. He was the only one who had that lingerie picture saved on his phone. And he knew my number, of course. Clearly, this was Matt's twisted way of getting back at me for breaking up with him. He stole my photo and used it to publicly harass and humiliate me. I felt so violated knowing my ex would violate my trust and privacy like this just for revenge. Still, a small part of me clung to the hope that Matt wasn't behind this. Maybe someone had hacked into his phone and stolen the picture. But deep down, I knew he was the only one with the means and motivation to do this. His jealous, controlling personality fit. I immediately filed a police report, feeling ashamed to even have to describe the situation to the officer. But the cops said there was little they could do without evidence proving it was Matt. I had already taken out a restraining order against him after the breakup, but this act didn't violate its terms. My only choice was to get the post removed as fast as possible. I reached out to a few close friends and asked them to report the post to Craigslist as inappropriate content. Thankfully, after several days of us continually flagging the post, Craigslist finally took it down. But the damage was already done. Even with the post removed, I kept getting inappropriate calls and messages from unfamiliar men who had seen it. The responses indicated some had even screenshot the photo and post before it was deleted. I ended up having to go through the hassle and expense of getting a new phone number. It was the only way to get the lewd messages to stop. But I still felt exposed knowing creeps had my photo saved on their phones, even if they no longer had my number to contact me directly. The whole traumatic experience left me shaken. I became hypervigilant, worrying anyone I met might have been one of the people who saw that horrendous post. I had trouble sleeping, afraid another nude photo could surface somewhere online. Matt's actions made me feel so powerless and degraded. In the end, no justice was served. But I learned my lesson about ignoring red flags in a relationship. Matt's controlling, jealous tendencies were apparent early on. I should have broken things off sooner instead of making excuses for his behavior. While what he did was unforgivable, I've determined not to let this experience turn me bitter or distrustful. I still believe there are good, decent people in this world, but I'll be more cautious about who I enter a relationship with moving forward. Any controlling or jealous behaviors will be an instant deal breaker. Sharing my story helps me heal while also warning others. Don't ignore attempts to isolate you from loved ones. Don't justify irrational jealousy or accusations. Those are signs of an abuser, and the abuse will only escalate. You deserve respect in a relationship. I'm still working through the emotional fallout from this violation, but each day gets a little easier. Matt wanted to break me, but I won't give him that satisfaction. This experience has made me stronger and warier. I now know my worth, and I'll never settle for less again. The best revenge is living boldly, and that's exactly what I intend to do. I've always had a love for antique and vintage furniture. There's something about the history and craftsmanship of old pieces that gives them more character than the mass-produced stuff today. So when I came across a beautiful antique wardrobe on Craigslist for only $200, I jumped at the chance to own this unique item. The seller had posted just a few photos, but from what I could see, the wardrobe looked to be in great condition. It was made of a rich, dark wood with intricate carved details along the doors and sides. The listing said it was an estate sale find, so I imagined it had once furnished some well-appointed home back in the day. At that bargain price, I knew I had to act fast, so I emailed the seller immediately saying I would take it. We arranged a time that evening for me to come see the wardrobe in person and complete the sale. I arrived at the seller's house, and they helped me carry the large piece out to my car. Under the porch light, I gave the wardrobe a close inspection. Just as the photos showed, the wood was solid and the hinges, handles, and carvings were intact. If it had any imperfections from age, I couldn't detect them. It was exactly what I was looking for to add some vintage flair to my bedroom decor. I happily paid the seller their asking price of $200 cash. As I drove home with my new treasure, I started picturing where I would place it and how nice my clothes would look organized inside it. This was one of those great Craigslist finds I had heard about, but never been lucky enough to experience myself until now. When I got home, I enlisted my husband's help to carry the heavy wardrobe upstairs and position it in our bedroom. We cleared out space in the corner and angled it so the front was visible from the doorway. It looked absolutely perfect there, like it had always been meant to furnish our room. Over the next couple days, I thoroughly cleaned inside the wardrobe to freshen it up. Using a wood polish, I also shined up the exterior to a glossy finish. It really looked as good as new now. I started the process of transferring my clothing into the ample storage space inside. Sweaters, pants, dresses, everything fit neatly on the wooden dowels and shelves. For the next couple of weeks, I was thrilled with how my vintage find had upgraded my bedroom. I admired its handsome details as I opened the doors each morning to pick out my outfit for the day. It made getting dressed feel special. Then one morning, I noticed something that worried me. As I pulled a favorite blouse out of the wardrobe, I saw several small holes in the fabric. Examining it closely, they almost looked like tiny burn marks. Very strange. Had I gotten some kind of cleaner on it accidentally? I checked a couple other shirts and found more holes. My heart sank as I realized there must be some kind of insect infestation in the wardrobe. Things got progressively worse over the next few days. More and more of my clothes hanging in the wardrobe had damage, ragged holes, missing threads, and odd stains. Brand new items I had just placed inside also later showed signs of deterioration. One day I opened the doors and noticed weird speckled powder along the inner walls. I bent down to look closer, and that's when I saw them. Tiny dark bugs scurrying around in the corners and crevices of the wardrobe. I frantically started pulling everything off the hangers and shelves to inspect for more bugs. They were everywhere, inside, behind, underneath, hundreds of little black creepy insects I had unknowingly brought into my home. Researching online, I soon identified the source of my unfolding horror, bed bugs. My vintage wardrobe came fully infested with these nightmarish pests. Everything made sense now. The bite-like holes, the staining, finding bugs on my clothing and sheets. The seller must have known about this and just wanted to pawn the problem off on someone else. I was disgusted and furious that I had wasted my money on this hazardous piece of junk. But more pressing was a massive ordeal now facing me to contain this bed bug problem and keep it from spreading further into my home and belongings. Just getting rid of the infested wardrobe itself would be a challenge. Not to mention the expense of cleaning or replacing my contaminated clothes, bedding, and other textiles. Following online tutorials, I spent hours dismantling the wardrobe and sealing up all contents in plastic bags for disposal. I vacuumed every inch of the surrounding area and had to tear up the carpet to ensure none were lurking in the floorboards. It was a stressful and exhausting process, but necessary to prevent the nightmarish bugs from proliferating more in my house. In the following weeks, I became almost paranoid about inspecting my skin and belongings for any traces of the wretched pests. I often awakened imagining I felt them crawling on me. I strictly quarantined the contaminated fabrics until I could launder or dispose of them all. Just thinking about that wardrobe now made my skin crawl with revulsion. This traumatic episode taught me to always thoroughly vet secondhand furniture before bringing it into my home. No matter how charming a piece seems, hidden dangers like insects can create an absolute nightmare. In hindsight, I wish I had noticed warning signs in the seller's listing or taken time to carefully inspect the wardrobe prior to purchasing it. But my enthusiasm clouded my judgment, and I paid a high price both financially and emotionally. I am slowly replacing my lost belongings, and I'm grateful the infestation did not extend beyond that Craigslist horror wardrobe. My home now feels clean and bug-free, but I doubt I will ever forget that unsettling discovery. Though I love antiques, I'll be sticking to verified vintage dealers and reputable retailers from now on. This was one bargain that definitely was not worth the cost I ended up paying for it. When I first saw the Craigslist ad for a management trainee position at Acme Enterprises, I was elated. It seemed almost too good to be true, a well-paying job at a supposedly fast-growing startup, just the kind of opportunity I've been hoping for since graduating college. In hindsight, I should have realized right away that things were too good to be true. But at the time, I was just so eager to get my career off the ground that I had overlooked all the warning signs. I have been struggling for months to find a job that actually used my new marketing degree. The only offers I got were for unpaid internships or commission-only sales jobs. So when I saw the Acme ad promising a $60,000 salary and benefits for a recent grad, I jumped at it without doing much vetting. The ad was light on details about the company itself, describing it vaguely as a dynamic young firm looking for driven self-starters. I sent in my resume that very night, crossing my fingers for a response. A few days later, I got a call asking me to interview the following week. I immediately cleared my schedule and spent every spare moment prepping. I wanted to make sure I was ready with polished answers to standard interview questions. Beyond that, I didn't research much about Acme itself, figuring I could ask questions at the interview. When the big day came, I put on my best interview outfit and headed to the address they had provided, ready to make a great impression. The office was located in a rundown commercial area on the outskirts of the city, not exactly the trendy startup hub I pictured. But I told myself not to judge prematurely. Maybe they prioritized affordable rent over flash. The office building itself was utterly nondescript, sandwiched between a self-storage place and an auto body shop. Inside, the lobby was dingy and sparse, with just a bored security guard and outdated directory. Acme Enterprises was listed as occupying Suite 201. I checked in at the front desk, got a visitor badge, and headed upstairs. The office turned out to be just as shabby as the building exterior, with worn carpet and paint-chipped walls. The woman who greeted me, Ellen, had me sit at a folding table while I waited for my interviewer. The table was piled high with unsorted papers and mailers. After a few minutes, Tony emerged and introduced himself as the hiring manager. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with an ill-fitting suit and messy hair. As we sat cramped in his tiny office, he asked me questions about my resume and skills. I tried my best to highlight my qualifications, pushing down my concerns about the unprofessional surroundings. Apparently, I made a good impression because a week later, Tony called to offer me the job. I had developed some doubts by then, but the pay and benefits were too generous to pass up. I rationalized away the sketchy office, figuring it was temporary while they got the business off the ground. So I accepted the position, gave notice at my part-time gig, and prepared to start my real career. On my first day, I learned the team I'd be working with was a mere 8 people, including myself. I thought startups were supposed to be bustling and fast-paced, but this office was eerily quiet. My workspace consisted of a small metal desk wedged in the back corner, facing a blank wall. When I asked Tony what my duties would be, he vaguely said I assist with operations while learning the business. However, the work he assigned was completely administrative, answering phones, filing, data entry. Whenever I asked for more responsibility, he'd say they were scaling up, and things were too chaotic now. As the weeks went on, I gradually noticed other odd things about Ackman. There didn't seem to be any actual products, services, or customers. No clients ever came to the office. The computers were ancient and not even connected to printers. And security was oddly stringent for such a small company, with multiple locked doors and cameras covering every inch. I decided to discreetly dig around online for more info about Ackman, but I uncovered no website, social media, or any online presence at all. The lack of a digital footprint felt very suspicious for a supposedly hot startup. When I tried asking casual questions to coworkers, they shut down immediately. That's when I began to worry I had made a grave mistake taking this job. I requested a meeting with Tony to address my growing concerns. Sitting in his cramped office, I directly laid out all the red flags I had observed. To my shock, Tony dropped the friendly facade and admitted outright that Ackman Enterprises was not a real company. It was essentially a front for laundering money, a way to filter illegal cash through a legitimate-looking business. I sat there stunned, unable to process what I was hearing. Tony went on to explain that tight security wasn't to keep people out. It was to prevent evidence or information from getting out. Now that I knew the truth, he made it clear that I was trapped here. If I tried to leave or expose their scheme, there would be dire consequences. I left Tony's office shaken, with no idea what to do next. I've continued showing up to work every day, too afraid of potential retaliation to go to the police. But I spend each day racked with anxiety, knowing I'm enabling criminal activity. I curse myself for not trusting my instincts earlier about this too-good-to-be-true job. Now I'm stuck in this claustrophobic office, just trying to figure out how to escape this nightmare scenario I've found myself in.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.